The Mongolian wind was not like any breeze Walter Green had known in his 78 years. It didn't merely pass through you. It scraped your memories bare, whistled through your soul, and left behind silence so wide you could drown in it. And that's precisely why he had come here, to disappear inside the quiet. 3 years had passed since the accident, since the rocks fell, since his son's voice vanished under snow and stone. Walt to his old colleagues, had been a renowned field biologist once, respected and slightly feared for his no-nonsense lectures on predator ecology. He had spent decades studying apex carnivores from Alaska to Patagonia, but no experience had prepared him for the day he heard his son scream, and then nothing at all. He never forgave himself. His wife hadn't either. After the funeral, he quit everything. His post at the university, the conservation fund he'd helped build, even his passport's comfort zone. Mongolia welcomed broken men with its brutal winds and open arms of endless rock. He settled near the Altai foothills in a crumbling wooden cabin that was more ice than shelter. No internet, no neighbors, only static-filled radio waves that sometimes carried whispers of home. Each morning he scribbled into a journal, wildlife sightings, temperature readings, cloud formations, but mostly he drew. Pikas, Argali sheep, eagles, and always cats, especially the cat. The palace's cat, or manol, as the locals called it, was not a creature of comfort. It wasn't like a lynx or bobcat, neither graceful nor social. Manols were wild grumps of fur and fang, short legs, flattened heads, permanent scowls. They lived alone, hunted alone, and vanished like smoke in the rocks. Walt had never seen one up close, until the day he found her. It was early winter. He had hiked toward a ravine where marmots nested under the frost-bitten shrubs. A motion sensor camera there had stopped transmitting. Probably snow, he thought, or wind damage. What he didn't expect was blood. Tiny, uneven droplets led him to a thicket of twisted thorns. There, tangled in a rusted snare, was the most pitiful bundle of fur he had ever seen. Her eyes, green as frozen moss, glared at him, not with fear, but with rage. Her front paw bled, caught in the crude wire loop. She was all bones and fluff. He should have left her. He knew that. Wildness must remain wild. But grief makes strange choices for you. And in her narrowed eyes, Walt saw not an animal, but a question he hadn't answered in years. He wrapped her in his coat. She didn't resist. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she didn't care. Back at the cabin, she refused everything for 2 days. Water, meat, movement. Walt kept his distance, speaking softly when he approached, crouching like she was a bomb. He named her Batar, Mongolian for warrior. On the 3rd night, when the temperature dropped below 0, she crawled across the floor and curled up beside his cot. She didn't purr. Manols don't. But her warmth was real. And it hurt. Over weeks, she healed. Her paw stopped bleeding. She limped, then walked. Never meowed, never played. Yet somehow she stayed. He built a small ledge by the window where she sat for hours, watching the steppe. Occasionally, she'd vanish for a day or two, only to reappear with snow on her whiskers. But she never wandered far. Not yet. In his journal, Walt noted every detail, her weight, appetite, coat thickness. But what he didn't write, couldn't, was how she filled the space left by a son he could no longer hold. Then came the tracks, not Batar's, bigger, cruder. Walt found them near his woodpile, boot prints, deep and wide. Someone else had come, a poacher maybe. The locals had warned him. Fur traders still prowled these lands, especially in winter. Manul pelts fetched high prices in underground markets. Their coats, so dense they survived the worst blizzards, were luxury commodities. Illegal, rare, deadly to acquire. Walt doubled his patrols. He took his old rifle from the closet and cleaned it for the first time in years. And then, one morning, Batar was gone. At first he waited. A day, then 2. By the 3rd, the wind felt like claws against his skin. He packed a bag, strapped on snowshoes, and followed her tracks into the foothills. The The climb was cruel. Ice coated every rock. Sunlight blinded more than it warmed. And still he walked, stumbling past his own memories. His son laughing by a campfire, scribbling notes into the margins of Walt's old field guides. The sound of that last avalanche, the weight of silence after. At dusk, Walt heard a sound, ragged breathing, sharp and fast. She was there. Caught again. A snare dug into her back leg, deeper this time and worse, tainted with something black and oily. Poison. For wolves, or worse. Walt dropped to his knees. "Easy, girl," he whispered. Batar didn't fight. Her eyes were dull now, dimmed. He worked the wire free with numb fingers, bundled her into his coat again. But when he stood, the ground cracked beneath him. A buried trap snapped shut. Steel teeth clamped around his calf. Pain screamed through his body as he collapsed. The sun sank. Snow began to fall. Walt dragged himself, bleeding, toward a narrow cave he had passed hours ago. Inside, it stank of foxes and rot. But it was shelter. He lit a fire. Fed Batar tiny flakes of dried meat. Her body shivered in sleep. He tore part of his sleeve to bandage his leg, knowing it wasn't enough. The night stretched into forever. Walt wrote by firelight in his journal. "If this is the end, let it be. She's worth it. I couldn't save my boy, but I saved her." He closed his eyes. "Pa-pa-pow." Light woke him, and voices. Mongolian. He blinked and saw a boy, maybe 15, standing at the cave mouth, holding a walking staff. Behind him, Batar sat upright. She had led him there. Walt wept silently. For his son, for the cat, for a second chance. Bah! Months later, he sat on a wooden bench in a herder's hut, sipping yak butter tea. His leg had healed badly. He would limp for life. But life still was. And that was enough. He mailed a letter to his daughter in Oregon. Wrote it in careful lines. "I've been stupid, silent, afraid. I never stopped loving you. I was just too ashamed to say it. There's a cat here. Fierce little ghost with 1,000 secrets. She reminded me that wild things don't owe us love, and yet, sometimes they give it." Cha-ba-bomb. One morning, walking with a stick, Walt reached the top of a ridge. The wind cut sharp and clean. Across the valley, a small figure sat on a boulder watching him. Ears round, tail curled, green eyes like shattered jade. He raised a hand. She didn't move, didn't blink. And then, like mist, she turned and vanished into the snow. She had never been his. That was the gift. She came and she left on her own terms. Wild, whole, and free. But for a while, in a winter without mercy, she stayed. And in staying, she saved him. Jessa.